Hello, and welcome to part 1 of my personal ranking of each and every level in Force Gemini, the cult classic N64 game that was recently released for the Switch. Before getting started, I do have a couple of disclaimers to get out of the way. First off, if you don't know who I am, I'm Canaris, the current world record holder for every speedrun category of the game. I've probably put more hours into this game than the developers themselves. With that said, I'll be factoring in some elements from speedrunning the game that may differ from a casual player. The main thing is that I know what enemies keep you from progressing in each area, and I don't put much thought into exploring like in a first-time playthrough. Looking at the map screen, you'll probably notice there are only 15 planets to explore. However, most planets have multiple levels or zones to them, designated by the lit displays separating them. The pause menu also lists levels this way for a total of 30 levels in the game, and these are what I'll be ranking. I've broken my ranking method into 5 categories so that one isn't placed higher than the other simply because I say I like it more. First, the environment, meaning how the level looks in the context of what it's meant to portray and whether that makes me want to explore it further. Second, the soundtrack. So many tunes from this game stand out and fit their levels well, so not giving every level a high rating was difficult. Speaking of difficulty, that's next. I like levels that provide a decent challenge by incorporating plenty of enemies to mow through and incentive to play well. The fourth will be pacing. Am I spending a lot of time running from one place to another, or am I engaging with the level? The action, or at least the activity of the level, needs to keep me occupied at least. Last is design, and this is a kind of miscellaneous category. It includes how well any unique ideas of the level were executed, how the different parts of the level fit together, and if there's any extra oomph factor that puts a level over the top. I like levels with oomph. All of these are scored on a 5-point scale for a total maximum score of 25 points. Okay, that took long enough to get through. One last thing. If you like Force Gemini content, be sure to check out my Twitch stream for live runs, join the Discord linked in the description, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, tuck me in bed, read me a story, and kiss me night-night. Okay, here's the video. Let's go. Number 30. Goldwood Outset. Ironically coming in first is the first level of the game. Without a starting level with you escaping the attack on your ship, this is the exact type of environment I would imagine for a starter level. It's a relatively simplistic jungle village with not much going on that sticks out. The soundtrack is again a simple jungle beat without much flair. It suits the level, but there isn't anything special about it. Being the first level, it's incredibly easy in terms of both navigation and enemies. You're basically under no threat while you work out how to play for the first time. The pacing is lackluster with only a handful of areas to progress through and only one enemy required to complete the level, a sniper drone perched on a tree. It's seemingly over before it gets going. Lastly, the design does have some merit. There are multiple paths that demonstrate how the game has branching options to navigate with secrets hidden. The fish pond and shuriken are technically in this zone, but they don't add much to the design of the level. The total score for Goldwood Outset is an 8 out of 25. Overall, the feeling of this level is basic, and I don't want no basic bitch. Number 29. Asteroid. Coming in just above last place is a slightly controversial pick, Asteroid. Hear me out though. This may be the final level, but to me at least, it's a dud. For being the last challenge you face before a rematch with Mizar, it's really underwhelming. The environment is its strongest feature. Visually, it feels intimidating despite lacking much variety. The music is ominous and foreboding, but doesn't pack much of a punch. You can tell it's the finale, but that doesn't hit like it should. As the final holdout of the game's villain, there isn't much standing in your way. Yes, there are quite a few strong enemies, but you can run right past them most of the time, aside from a handful blocking the only life force door of the level. The pacing lets me down in the same way. This is it, the last level, and it's one of the shortest. I was wanting a gauntlet of enemies to stand in my way, making a last stand, but it's almost straight to the boss. The design overall is a letdown as well. The ice maze is cool, despite just allowing you to shoot your way through in a straight line, but there's just nothing to this level. It squeaks past last place with a total score of 9 out of 25. Number 28. Space Station, Abandoned Wreck. Next up is the Abandoned Space Station. I feel like this level had a lot of potential with its spookiness and late game placement. However, its unfinished nature leaves a lot to be desired. Entering the level, the vibe is completely different than the rest of the game. It's dark and enemies move fast, namely due to the frame rate not being an issue here. The exterior of the level features a gaping hole in the ship, adding to the mystery of what this level used to be. What existed here previously? What happened to it? The soundtrack, though simple, adds to this overall creepiness. I do wish it stood out just a little more though. Just a small amount of accents could have gone a long way. For the other categories, difficulty, pacing, and design, there isn't much praise to give. The difficulty and pacing are non-existent. The level is just open to explore, and the enemies are just flavor. The design does allow for the level to be a maze that is easy to get lost in, even though it's a relatively small space. In the end, the level just needed more attention to earn a higher place with a total score of 9 points out of 25. Number 27, Tawfret Bog. Tawfret Bog is the first zone of the planet Tawfret, and it's mostly another level where you're just passing through. There's a life force door in the first area leading to 2 tribals, but aside from that, it's just a brief walk to the exit. The environment of the level is mildly interesting with the zombified enemies, but it isn't enough to carry the level. The soundtrack suits the level's theme pretty well, but aside from being one of the first tracks composed for the game, it doesn't have anything especially interesting going on. Since the level is so small and involves so few enemies, its difficulty and pacing are severely lacking. I'm surprised this zone is even its own level actually, instead of being combined with Tawfret Bridge, seen a little later on this list. Lastly, it's hard to find anything positive to say about the design. There's just not much of anything going on. The level's score gets carried by its environment and tune for a score of 9 out of 25. Number 26, Gem Quarry Landing. Next on this list is Gem Quarry, and if you're familiar with this level, I know what you're thinking. How can a level without enemies or anything to explore not be placed last? I am considering the gem harvesting minigame as a factor for this level. The design and soundtrack are the same rating as Gem Quarry Outset, which did come in last since they're basically identical. It's another jungle village with a repetitive beat going in the background. However, the difficulty of the level is higher due to the minigame having a kind of difficult window to execute well. Even if there's no consequences to doing the minigame slowly, which does hurt the level's pacing, it is more of a challenge than levels placed lower on the list. The general pacing hurts the level though, with it being just 2 areas along with the huts placed around it. I'm also not a fan of the design, with it being a complete reskin of Goldwood without anything new included, aside from one of the most frustrating minigames the developers could think of. In the end, the level earns a 9 out of 25 points and rounds out the bottom 5. Number 25, Walkway Peak. Moving on, we have Walkway Peak. I actually really like the way this level looks. I think it sparks a lot of imagination as to what this lone structure is doing on an isolated planet. It reminds me of Kame House from Dragon Ball a little. The environment itself does earn a decent rating from that. The soundtrack, aside from a brief moment in the elevator, is basically non-existent though, so there isn't anything to add to the level there. Difficulty and pacing wise, there also isn't a lot going on. You're mostly in and out and on with your day. Because it's a minor level, the pacing doesn't take as big a hit since it's supposed to be short. The overall design is still lacking to me. I wish this level had one more thing to it beyond what's already there to set it apart from other levels. As it stands, it's the last of the group that earns 9 points out of 25. Moving on. Number 24, Water Ruin Island. Water Ruin is another hidden planet level. This one with even less to technically do in terms of gameplay. The environment is nice for what the level is. It's another place where you wonder what the history of it is. Unfortunately, there isn't much indication as to what could have been here or what happened before. The soundtrack is one of the first that really sticks out. It's not one of my favorites, but I know that it's the favorite of a lot of people. The difficulty and pacing here are basically nowhere to be seen, because there aren't any enemies and the level is just there to roam around and collect what needs collecting. This would have been an awesome arena for a boss fight, where you're stuck on the island with the boss circling around on top of the water. Oh well. With that said, the design of the level earns a low rank as well, unfortunately. Water Ruin is a nice place to get away, but it's not much of a level, earning 10 points out of 25. Number 23, Goldwood Interior. Here we have a return to Goldwood. This time, it's for Goldwood Interior. This is the first level of the game where there's a little more going on and the player gets to test their abilities. The environment and soundtrack earn the same as the previous Goldwood entry, but the jungle beat does suit the heightened action of this portion a little better. Difficulty-wise, the level has a little bit to it with multiple areas that require clearing and different types of enemies, but it's a beginner level without much threat. The pacing is decent. You progress at a pretty good skip through each linear area of the level with enemies around corners in several places. I think it's a decent first level for a new player. This earns the design an extra push, but it's not enough to get it into the higher ranks. Even as a starter level, I wish that Goldwood's first real zone had something that makes it memorable, aside from being the first place the player visits. In the end, it also earns 10 points out of 25. Number 22, Palace Flume. I actually really enjoy the environment of this level. It's one of the few places where extended swimming is incorporated into it, and the aquarium is a nice touch with the fish everywhere. The waterways have a nice color palette, and the exterior portions of Mizar's palace look appropriate for being the main layer of the big bad. The soundtrack is fairly mid. It fits the level, but it's not a standout track. Unlike some of the later levels, I'm not humming along to this one. Difficulty and pacing, though, are completely poor. The only difficulty to this level is navigating the underwater maze, but there aren't any enemies or dangers while you're swimming around. It's not like you can drown. Similarly, the pacing is entirely up to how quickly the player navigates the maze, and once you know the route, it's a straight shot. The design does have an idea behind it, but, and I know I sound like a broken record, I wish there was something more going on here. Having each character enter Mizar's base their own way using their exclusive abilities, it feels like there should be something special here. But it's just some time in the pool. End score is 11 out of 25. Number 21, Anubis Passageway. Passageway is one of the few places where the jetpack is fully utilized. Unfortunately, that utilization doesn't amount to much. The level has you fuel up completely and just hover from one side to the other, taking minutes. The environment is pretty enjoyable. I like the platforms jutting out with the enemies on them, but I'm not marveling at anything I come across here. The Anubis track is one of my favorites, so even though it doesn't perfectly fit here, it's going to earn a decent score. There isn't much to say in terms of difficulty. The hardest part of the level is making sure you have enough fuel to reach the next platform. Unlike many other levels getting low scores for being too short, this level is way too long for what it is. All you're doing is hovering around from one end of the long hallway to the other, and back again. The design is at least a novel concept, although I think this could have been another cool place for a late-stage boss that never happened. Imagine having to hover from platform to platform as you run from a giant flying boss. You have to find safe ground to fire from while continuously seeking a new place to land. One can dream. The final score for Passageway is an 11 out of 25. Number 20, Anubis Depository. Staying on Anubis, we have the Depository. This level seems like a giant maze made by shipping containers, but it's almost entirely a straight path. What's with this game disguising straight paths as mazes? Once you realize there aren't dead ends or multiple directions to go, the appeal of this level fades a little. I do like the way the level looks as the barriers extend high toward the ceiling, limiting your view and allowing enemies to hide behind corners. Unfortunately, like many of the low-ranking levels, these enemies don't need any attention and you can walk right by. The only potential threat is a ninja drone who tries to kill tribals in a room off to the side. Also, all of the tribals in this level are babies. Are they planning on shipping them off or something? Probably best not to get into it. The pacing is a little better than Passageway since it's not a slog, but it doesn't come in much better. In terms of design, I'm not a huge fan, but it isn't a total disappointment. The level is different in terms of its layout and presentation, but that difference doesn't produce anything entertaining. Man, y'all are gonna think I don't like this game after this part of the list, I swear. Depository earns 12 points out of 25 as we get into the top 20. Number 19. Palace Lobby. Back to Mizar's Palace for Juno's entry. Unlike his companions who sneak in some side entrances, Juno busts through the front door. The environment is a pretty good one with the pyramid entrance and the underground tunnels. Again, the soundtrack fits the level, but isn't a standout track among some of the greats. There isn't any difficulty to this level either. Well, aside from finding which torch has a false bottom and watching Juno break his legs from the fall. The pacing is almost there. Not earning a high score, but showing some promise. The length to the level is good, but there isn't enough going on to justify a high rank. The design, like the soundtrack, doesn't stand out as a hit, but it is well done enough. The ideas behind parts of it are interesting, but the whole isn't more than the sum of its parts. Juno's portion of Mizar's Palace, the lobby, scores a 12 out of 25. Number 18. Tawfret Bridge. Back to the zombie planet for number 18 on the list, Tawfret Bridge. This level involves a quick sprint through enemies before reaching a lake and subsequently an abandoned village. The environment is much like Tawfret Bog, but it feels a little more threatening with the ominousness of the soundtrack starting to match. Unfortunately, since only one set of enemies triggers the only life force door, the difficulty is super low. The pacing is similarly low, with it being a little all over the place. It's a quick brush with areas with enemies, followed by a treasure hunt for pants and robot parts. I'm not a huge fan. I do like the design though, or elements of it at least. Going through the sewers to find robot parts and tribals is a treat, and the abandoned village is a spooky plus. It seems like we're starting to push from the mediocre into the decent levels now, with Tawfret Bridge earning another 12 points out of 25. Number 17. Spawnship Troop Carrier. Spawnship is a weird case. On the one hand, it's a sprawling level that can turn into a maze with branching paths. On the other hand, there just isn't much there. The environment feels like a troop carrier battleship with enemies placed all over, but it feels a little bland. The soundtrack seems to fit the level, but likewise, it's a little bland. It's not especially difficult, and its pacing is truly all over the place. It can be a quick pass to get through, or a long search for all the tribals. It does have some nice goodies hidden throughout, like the shocker and a lot of capacity crates. It's just too inconsistent to be a winner. Overall, its design is decent, and in the end, that's a good description of the Spawnship as a whole. Decent. 12 out of 25. Number 16. Rith Essa Mine. Where do you place a level like Rith Essa Mine? Apparently, right at the halfway point on the list. It's an excellent multiplayer level, I'll give it that. The design and soundtrack are top-notch. The mine interior suits what the level is going for, with gems sprinkled throughout and broken shafts lining the tunnels. The track is shared with Water Ruin and carries this level. Unfortunately, that's all there is to the mine. There's no difficulty, nothing to draw attention to the pacing, and this drags the design of the level down with it. An excellent layout of a level that has nothing fun to fill it. In the end, it scores a 13 out of 25. And there you have the first half of the rankings for Force Gemini's levels. If you want to see how the top levels line up, you'll have to tune in to the next video covering the best levels in the game. In the meantime, be sure to like, follow, subscribe, ding bells, this, that, the other. If you like Force Gemini, definitely join our community Discord, linked in the description, and I'll see you next time.